Who made that dish? Bring them to me. Right now.
That be me. But just so you know, I was literally trying to escape. It's complicated.
Whoever cooked that, get them in here. Now. That's me. Although, full disclosure, I was kind of in the middle of leaving. Kang Min-jun set down his fork. In 7 years of working beside him, Tae-young had seen that happen exactly twice. Once before a firing. Once when something had caught the boss's complete and total attention. Right now, Min-jun's eyes were aimed at the kitchen door, and something was moving across his face that Tae-yang couldn't name. Not anger, not calculation. Something closer to being caught off guard, which, as far as Tae-yang was concerned, wasn't supposed to be possible. 3 hours earlier, Jenna Washington was buttoning up her catering uniform on the 2 train, and her hands wouldn't quite cooperate. Not nerves, she'd been crying since 10 in the morning, and her fingers still hadn't gotten the memo to calm down. The termination notice had come by text. One text. Please be advised that your employment contract has been terminated effective immediately. 5 years. 4 a.m. Call times. Skipped lunches to stretch the ingredient budget. 2 raises she'd let slide because she didn't want to rock the boat. 5 years. And it ended in a push notification she almost missed because her phone was on silent. She jammed in her earbuds and pulled up Beyoncé. It was the fastest way she'd found to stop crying. Not because the music made her feel better, exactly, but because it was too loud for the sad thoughts to compete. One thing, she told herself, staring at the blur of tunnel wall outside the window. Tonight's gig covers next month's rent. That's enough. That's enough for now. The building on 57th Street was the quietest place Jenna had ever walked into. The marble floors were so polished she could hear her own sneakers and felt vaguely embarrassed about it. Marco, the catering team lead, pulled her aside near the service elevator and spoke in the clipped, urgent tone of someone delivering classified information. Client tonight is Chairman Kang. Do not speak to him. Do not make eye contact. Drop the plates and disappear. Jenna nodded. She'd spent 5 years being invisible in someone else's kitchen. She had the skill set. The kitchen. Though the kitchen was a problem, she saw it the second she walked in. The traffic flow was wrong. A full appetizer tray blocking the main line, and 2 sauce pots on burners turned up way too high, teetering towards scorched. Jenna didn't ask Marco. She just moved the pots. Then she picked up the next tray. The accident happened on the 12th plate. Except it wasn't really an accident. Min-jun pushed his chair back without warning. Jenna was already in that exact space, and the braised short rib sauce landed on his white shirt and silver tie, with the kind of precision that felt almost personal. The entire table went still. Tae-yang's hand moved slowly into his jacket pocket. Jenna closed her eyes for 1 second and then opened them. I'm so sorry, But Min-jun wasn't looking at his shirt. He was looking at the tray, at the food still left on it. When he spoke, his voice was quiet in a way that had nothing to do with being polite. Who made this? Not a question. Jenna recognized the tone she'd heard it in restaurants for 5 years. The exact register a person's voice drops to when something tastes genuinely good and they're not prepared for it. When the compliment comes out sideways because they haven't gotten there yet. I did. He looked at her then. Really looked. Straight at her face. And Jenna's whole body said, run. She actually took a half step back. Min-jun watched that tiny retreat, and something happened at the corner of his mouth. So fast she almost missed it. Almost. Chairman Kang would like to see you. Jenna retied her apron strings. She had the distinct sense that something had gone sideways in a way she didn't fully understand yet. And underneath that, and she was annoyed at herself for this, something that felt uncomfortably like excitement. You don't get to feel excited, she told herself. You got fired twice today. But her feet were already following him down the hall, floor-to-ceiling windows. All of Manhattan spread out below like someone had spilled a jar of lights. Min-jun was standing at the glass, instead of sitting, and he'd already changed his tie, fresh white shirt. Not a trace of short rib sauce anywhere. Jenna found this slightly irritating. She still smelled like the kitchen. He spoke without turning around. Are you available to work here, starting tomorrow? 1. This man is definitely not normal. 2. That kitchen was extraordinary. 3. Rent. What are the terms? She said. He turned then, and she watched him register something, that she was standing in front of him without flinching, without the careful performance of smallness. She'd seen every other person in the building put on around him. Something shifted in his expression. Second time tonight? Your identity stays off the books. A beat short, deliberate. And my mother's memorial meal. I choose the dishes myself. Jenna heard the weight in that. He wasn't asking for good food. This was a man who missed something. And the thing he missed had a taste. She'd learned in 5 years of cooking that you never half-ass a dish that someone made out of grief. You just don't. When do I start? 6 a.m. Stay. You need to eat this. I'm serious. Are you giving me an order right now? No. I'm begging. If this soup gets cold, I will take it as a personal professional insult. Min-jun ate the soup. Taeyang witnessed this from the hallway and quietly pulled the door shut. In 7 years, he had never once seen the boss comply with anyone's request. Not a board member's, not a lawyer's, certainly not a cook's. The first week was reconnaissance, though neither of them would have called it that. Min-jun's kitchen was enormous and almost aggressively well-stocked, which made it worse. Somehow all that potential, and the refrigerator was full of ingredients quietly expiring in the dark. First morning, Jenna opened the crisper drawer and found 2 shriveled lemons and a stick of butter that had gone waxy and strange. She stood there for a moment. A kitchen like this, a man eating like that. Her professional instincts kicked in before her manners could stop them. She figured out his schedule in 2 days, skipped breakfast, powered through lunch on coffee and momentum, came home late and grabbed whatever was coldest and closest. On the 3rd night, she timed his arrival and had something on the table when he walked in, left it in the pot with the lid on, so it would hold its heat. She didn't wait around. She just left it there. Next morning, the pot was empty and rinsed clean. He hadn't said a word. Neither had she. Diego Ramirez texted every single morning without fail. The format changed. The message didn't. You going back to that crime lord's house today? Googled Kang Min-jun. 0 results. You know that's actually scarier, right? Jenna. I'm worried sick. I literally cannot sleep at night. Okay, I sleep fine, but emotionally I cannot sleep. Jenna read his text on the subway and laughed into her coat collar. Diego had been her first real friend in New York. They'd been assigned the same station on the first day of culinary school, and when Jenna had fumbled a flat of eggs onto the floor, he'd just crouched down next to her and started picking them up. No commentary, no drama. His worry was always overblown. It was also always genuine, which was the thing about Diego. The kitchen is incredible. Best gas burners I've ever used in my life. His reply came back in under a second. Chefs are genuinely beyond help, I swear to God. Min-jun almost never came into the kitchen, but when he did, there was always a reason. The first time, she'd set a pot down too hard. The second time, she'd been humming. The third time, Min-jun would have had trouble explaining the third time. What he noticed was that she never stopped what she was doing when he walked in. Every other person on his staff went a little rigid when he entered a room. Conversations tightening, posture correcting itself. Jenna didn't. She'd tear up over onions and wipe her face on her sleeve. She'd mutter at a sauce that wasn't cooperating. She'd do this small private fist pump when something came together right, like she'd forgotten there was anyone else in the building. One evening, he came in and she was talking to herself, back to him, completely absorbed. He got close enough to hear before she noticed him. She was running a recipe out loud: 2 tablespoons butter, 3 cloves garlic, and only 1 kind of thyme if you use 2. They start arguing with each other. He cleared his throat. She turned around without a trace of embarrassment. Did you catch all of that? Up to the time. She shrugged. Then you missed the important part. Min-jun stood there and realized he'd already forgotten why he'd walked in. People who were afraid and performed accordingly, and people who wanted something and were smart enough to hide it. Jenna didn't fit either column. She'd nearly dropped formality with Min-jun 3 times in the first week. She'd redesigned the refrigerator inventory system without asking anyone. She gave the boss actual grief when he skipped breakfast. And this was the part that got to Taeyang. It worked. 7 years. And Taeyang had never once successfully told Min-jun to eat something. He raised it carefully. Should I look further into Ms. Washington's background? Min-jun glanced up from his files. No, just that. Taeyang didn't push. But walking back down the hall, he turned it over in his mind. In 7 years, the boss had never told him to stop looking into someone either. Last Friday of the month, Jenna was gathering her things to leave when she spotted something on the kitchen windowsill. A small pot of basil. She stopped. In her first week, she'd said out loud, to no one in particular, While rooting around the spice shelf, that fresh basil would make a real difference. She hadn't even been talking to him. She'd barely known he was in the room. But someone had heard it. And someone had gone and gotten basil and put it on the windowsill without leaving a note, without mentioning it, without making it into anything. Admitting that this man was kind in a strange, sideways, barely visible way felt annoying to Jenna, like losing a small argument she hadn't agreed to have. But annoyed or not, the fact was the fact. She slid the pot a few inches toward the stronger light at the edge of the sill, picked up her bag. She already knew what she was making tomorrow morning, had known it for the last 3 blocks of her commute home. Some things you just know. 3 weeks in, on a Wednesday morning, Jenna found the notebook. Found is generous. She was hauling a cast-iron Dutch oven out of the back of the lowest cabinet, and something got knocked loose and hit the floor. She picked it up. The cover had Korean writing on it, which she couldn't read. But underneath the characters, someone had drawn a small pot. Ballpoint pen, pressed hard into the paper. The kind of drawing you make slowly and carefully when you're putting something down that matters. She opened it. Pages dense with handwriting Korean. All of it. None of it legible to her, but the handwriting itself told a story she could follow without translation. Little arrows, circles, underlines in different colors, like the writer had come back to the same pages more than once, over years. Some pages had soaked up enough oil to turn translucent at the edges. One page was brown and faintly scorched along the margin, like it had gotten too close to a flame and someone had pulled it back just in time. She was about to close it when she found the photograph tucked into the last page. A boy, maybe 5 or 6, standing at a kitchen counter stirring something in a bowl. A woman beside him, her hand wrapped around his, guiding the motion. The woman's face was half out of frame, the photo cropped too tight, or maybe taken in a hurry, but her smile had made it in. All of it. Jenna stood there holding the notebook and thought about what day it was. He doesn't eat that day. Every year. She spent the afternoon thinking about the notebook. She couldn't read it, but she could see things, the numbers beside ingredients. The way certain pages had been folded open so many times, the crease had gone soft and permanent, and one page in particular that was more worn than any other, more touched. She didn't know the word Doenjang Jjigae. She didn't know what the dish was called or what was in it. What she knew was that this page had been returned to more than any other page in the book, and that meant something she understood without needing a translation. She got out her phone and searched for Korean grocery stores in Queens. Thursday, 5 a.m. Jenna was in the kitchen an hour early, ingredients lined up on the counter, like she was about to take an exam. Fermented soybean paste from a market in Flushing, soft tofu, zucchini, anchovies, dried kelp. She'd spent 4 hours on YouTube the night before, and at 2 in the morning, she'd found a Korean cooking forum and typed out a question about the difference between varieties of Doenjang, feeling slightly absurd, and someone had answered her within 10 minutes, cheerfully and in detail, at 2 in the morning, which felt like a small miracle. She put the water on and noticed her hands weren't quite steady. Not the bad kind of shaking, not grief, not fear. The kind that comes when something actually matters, and your body knows it before your brain catches up. She was nervous. Properly, genuinely nervous, in a way she hadn't been for Min-jun before this moment. He came in at 8, stopped in the doorway. The smell hit him first. There's no clean way to describe what fermented soybean paste smells like to someone who grew up with it. It doesn't translate into other food languages, doesn't map onto anything Western or neutral. It just smells like early morning, like the time before school, like a kitchen that still had his mother in it. Jenna knew he'd come in. She kept her back to him anyway, lifted the earthenware pot off the burner, and carried it to the table without turning around. Set it down. Put the spoon beside it. It might not be exactly right, she said, still not looking at him. I've never made it before, but I meant every bit of it. That was all. No explanation, no soft-voiced condolences, no performance of sympathy. Just the pot, just the spoon. Min-jun pulled out the chair and sat down. He picked up the spoon slowly. The first sip, nothing, no reaction, just stillness. The second, same. Jenna turned on the faucet and started washing the prep bowls, running water into the silence so he could have the room to himself, even though she was standing 10 feet away. After a while, he spoke. Very quiet. How did you know? She turned off the water. The notebook. There was a photo inside. I saw the pot in the picture. She paused. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have opened it. He didn't say she was wrong too. He didn't say anything for a moment, but she could see from where she stood that something around his eyes was different than usual. She turned the faucet back on. That same evening, across town, someone made a decision. A mid-level member of Min-jun's organization 3 years in, 2 promotions blocked. A grievance. He'd been carrying like a stone in his shoe, sent a message to a contact on the other side of a line that was not supposed to be crossed. The message was brief. Unidentified female. Non-staff. Entering and leaving the chairman's penthouse daily, early mornings. He thought of it as leverage. He thought of it as evening a score. He didn't think past that. Jenna didn't know. Min-jun didn't know yet. Tae-young found out 2 days later and walked to the door of Min-jun's private office with a folder and stood there for a moment before knocking. Recognize this moment? Someone cold and locked down, cracked open by a single bowl of food. It's easy to call that a romance trope and move on. But sit with it for a second. A person who's never been looked after doesn't know how to receive it. They don't have the muscle for it. What Jenna handed Min-jun wasn't soup. It was the sensory memory of a time before he became what he is now. And she did it without asking for anything back, without even fully understanding what she was giving. The problem is that in Min-jun's world, the people who get close enough to matter are exactly the people who end up in danger. Tae-yang put the report on Min-jun's desk Thursday night and stepped back. Min-jun went through it page by page. His face was empty in the way that Tae-yang had learned, over 7 years, to find more alarming than anger. Anger had a shape. It had weather preceding it, a certain tension in the jaw, a particular stillness in the shoulders that meant the storm was still a few minutes out. This was different. This was the face of someone who had already decided. The last page had 2 names on it. The man inside the organization who'd sent the message, and the person on the other side who'd received it. Min-jun put one finger on the second name, held it there for a moment, then lifted it. Change, Ms.? Washington's entry point starting tomorrow, he said. Service garage, not the front. Tae-young nodded. And the other one? Min-jun closed the folder. I'll handle it myself. Jenna didn't know any of this. Friday morning she was there at 6, watered the basil, got Min-jun's breakfast going. The only thing different was the new route in Tae-yang had said something about a security check, and Jenna hadn't pushed it. The kitchen was the same. That was enough. At 11, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. 3 lines. Do you know what kind of place you're working in? Do you know what Kang Min-jun's connection is to your old boss, Robert Chase? If you're curious, search it yourself. Chase Group investor filings. Jenna set her phone down on the counter. Then she picked it back up. Chase Group. The parent company of the restaurant where she'd spent 5 years. Robert Chase, the man she'd filed a formal HR complaint against. The man who'd made sure she got a termination text 2 days later. Just reading the name again made her hands go cold. She remembered the night she'd filed the report. Diego had sat next to her at her kitchen table until 2 in the morning, going over the language of the document with her, and she'd let herself believe that this time it would be different. That putting it in writing through the right channels would mean something. It hadn't meant anything. She typed both names into the search bar. Kang Min-jun. Chase Group. No news articles. But a public investor disclosure came up, a New York real estate development project. 3 years old. She scrolled through the names. His was there. Jenna turned off the burner. Min-jun came out of his office at 2 in the afternoon and knew immediately that something was wrong. When Jenna was in the kitchen, there was always sound knife on board, water, running, the low, private soundtrack of someone completely absorbed in what they were doing. Running, the kitchen was silent. He opened the door. Jenna had her apron folded on the counter and her bag on her shoulder. She looked at him when he walked in. No tears. Somehow that was heavier. You knew about Chase Group. He didn't deny it. To Jenna, that was the same as confirming it. You knew what he did to me. Min-jun said nothing. Jenna nodded, once the kind of nod that's really just a person confirming something to themselves, and smoothed the folded apron with her palm one more time. Keeping her hands busy was the only thing standing between her and crying, and she was not going to cry in this kitchen. I think I should go. He stood there and let her walk out of the kitchen. He knew he should stop her. He understood, in a clear and functional way, that something was being lost right now, and that words existed that could change the trajectory of the next 60 seconds. The problem was that the word he needed wasn't in his vocabulary. Not because he didn't have language. Min-jun had always had language, precise and controlled. But because what was called for here wasn't explanation or negotiation, it was something else, something with a different shape entirely, and he couldn't locate it fast enough. The front door opened and closed. The elevator button chimed softly in the hallway. Taeyang came in from the corridor. He looked at the kitchen, the folded apron on the counter, the pot on the stove with the flame off, and then he looked at Min-jun. When he spoke, his voice was careful and even. "She's at the elevator," wiping her face on her sleeve. Min-jun moved. For the first time in as long as either of them could remember, he went after someone. The elevator doors were just starting to slide open when Min-jun came around the corner. Jenna had her back to him. She heard the footsteps and made a decision not to turn around. Then the footsteps stopped, and she turned around anyway. He looked unprepared. That was the word for it. Like a man who had rehearsed many versions of many difficult conversations and had not rehearsed this one. "The investment relationship with Chase was dissolved 3 years ago," he said. "What he did to you I found out after you came here." Jenna stood with that for a moment. She couldn't verify it. She had no way of knowing, standing in this hallway, whether that was true. But Min-jun was in this hallway. This man, who did not chase people, who did not explain himself, who had spent 7 years making sure the world understood that his time and his attention were not things you asked for. He was standing here. That was data. It doesn't change the fact that your name was on that list while my complaint was getting buried. "No," he said, "it doesn't." The elevator doors had opened and closed again while they were talking. Jenna shifted her bag strap. "I can't figure out right now whether I believe you." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and she let it. "So I think I need to just go home tonight." He didn't argue. He reached past her and pressed the elevator button himself. When she stepped in and the doors began to close, he spoke. "I'll take care of what happened with Chase." Directly, Jenna said nothing. The doors shut. Alone in the elevator, descending through the floors, she pressed the back of her hand to her mouth and cried. Not because she was sad, exactly, but because she believed him. That was the worst part. After everything, she still believed him. And she hadn't realized until this moment how badly she'd needed to believe someone. She'd forgotten that feeling. She'd been forgetting it for a long time. Jenna got home at 7. She made it up 2 flights of stairs before she called Diego, and he picked up before the second ring. "Hey, what's wrong? I can hear it." She sat down on the landing between the 2nd and 3rd floor, back against the wall, knees up. "Diego, I got fired again." A pause. "Short. I'm coming over." She started to say he didn't have to, but the line was already dead. He showed up 40 minutes later with a box of fried chicken and 2 cans of beer, and they sat on the kitchen floor because the table had a wobbly leg and neither of them had ever bothered to fix it. "Okay," Diego said, cracking his can. "Start from the beginning." So she did. The catering gig, the sauce, the job offer, the basil plant, the notebook, the Doenjang Jjigae, the text message, the investor filing, the folded apron on the counter, all of it. Diego ate his chicken and listened without interrupting once, which for Diego was an act of genuine restraint. When she finished, he took a long sip of beer and said, "Jenna, you like him." She put her chicken down. "That's not the point right now. It's kind of the whole point." Jenna looked at the ceiling. Diego slid his beer can across the floor toward her. Then his voice dropped. "Hey, the Chase thing." He said the name the way you'd say the name of a thing you want to pick up with tongs. "We're not just letting that go this time, right?" Jenna took the beer, kept looking at the ceiling for a long moment. The next morning, Min-jun's kitchen stayed dark. Jenna was at her own table instead, laptop open, a blank document on the screen, and she sat in front of it for a long time without typing, thinking about what had gone wrong the first time, the HR report, the careful language, the right channels, the assumption that the system would do what systems were supposed to do. It hadn't. The complaint had gone in and disappeared, absorbed into the machinery of an organization that had no interest in finding it. So the system hadn't worked. That meant she needed something the system couldn't absorb. She started typing, slowly at first, then without stopping. She wrote her name. She wrote the dates. She wrote the specific place, the specific words that had been said to her, the specific morning she'd found the termination text. No legal hedging, no softening, no careful corporate phrasing designed to make the thing easier to dismiss. Just the truth, in plain English. In her own voice. the way she'd tell it to a friend sitting across from her on a kitchen floor. Diego was beside her on the couch with his phone up. "Whenever you're ready, I'll film." Jenna read back over what she'd written. Then she got up and got her apron off the hook by the door. The one she wore every day. She tied it on. It was the most honest thing she owned. The video was 4 minutes long. She didn't edit out the part where her voice shook. She didn't cut the moment near the end where she had to stop and breathe. She posted it as is, because the shakiness was the point. It was proof that this was real, that a real person with real hands and a real career had been handed a text message and told that 5 years meant nothing. "Why I actually got fired." 3 hours later, 100,000 views. Diego's phone had given up on individual notifications and switched to batched summaries. Jenna's phone was off. She couldn't read the comments yet. Good or bad, kind or cruel. All of it felt too loud. She was sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee and staring at the wall when the text came in from Min-jun's number. 2 lines. "I saw it." That took guts. Then a third, a minute later. "My association with Chase is being formally dissolved today. It'll be public by tonight. Okay, I like him." Jenna turned the phone face down on the table, but the corner of her mouth had already given her away. The statement went out that evening. Short, direct, no corporate softness. Min-jun's name. Chase's name. A clear line of language expressing support for Jenna's account. Inside the organization, it landed like a stone through a window. Taeyang reported that certain people were questioning the boss's judgment. Min-jun was signing off on documents when he heard this and didn't look up. "Let them question it," he said. Taeyang watched him for a moment. Then, for the first time in 7 years of working beside this man, Taeyang smiled. Small, brief, real. "Come on in." The message was blunt and short and offered nothing resembling warmth. And Jenna laughed out loud on the subway. A real laugh, and the elderly woman sitting across from her caught it and smiled back, without knowing why. The basil was still on the windowsill when she walked in. Someone had been watering it. The soil was dark and damp. She dropped her bag, tied on her apron, and turned to find Min-jun in the kitchen doorway, fixing his tie. By himself. He'd stopped waiting for someone to do it for him. Or maybe he'd just decided. She didn't say anything about it. She reached for a pot. "Michelin inspection is next month," he said. "I know. You'll be ready. Obviously." He stepped into the kitchen one step, careful, like he was checking whether the ground would hold, and came to stand beside her. The silence between them was awkward in the way that only happens when 2 people are both aware of it, both choosing to stay anyway. Jenna spoke without turning her head. "Are you going to help or just stand there?" "I can't actually chop anything." "Then peel the garlic." He picked up the garlic. His technique was terrible. She watched him for a second from the corner of her eye and felt something loosen in her chest. Not dramatically, not all at once, just the way a knot works itself loose over time. She turned back to the stove. Cooking that carries its origins without being confined by them. Jenna read that line out loud to Diego over the phone, and Diego cried full, immediate, zero hesitation tears, and Jenna had been holding it together right up until that moment. But Diego crying was the thing that got her. And then she cried too, standing in Min-jun's kitchen with a dish towel pressed to her face. That evening, Min-jun appeared in the doorway. "Congratulations." Jenna dried her hands on the towel and turned around. "Thank you. Hey, can I ask you something?" He waited. "That first night, when you offered me the job, was it actually about the food?" He was quiet for a moment, the particular quiet she'd come to recognize as him buying time to stay honest. "It was both," he said. "Half and half." Jenna considered this. "I'll take it. This is how he does it. Not with words, not with gestures designed to be noticed. With the towel, with the garlic, with showing up and staying." She had known people who said big things and disappeared. She had not known many people who just quietly stayed. She turned back to the stove. The kitchen smelled like garlic and basil, and something neither of them had a word for yet. It comes back around. Just never in the shape you expected. Do you remember the morning Jenna's hands were shaking over that pot? She wasn't nervous about the cooking. She was nervous because, for the first time in a long time, she genuinely wanted to do something right for someone else, not for a review. Not for a paycheck, not to keep her job. Just because he was a person who had lost something, and she had the means to give a small piece of it back. That's where care actually starts, not in the grand gesture, in the shaking hands, in the 4 a.m. YouTube spiral about fermented soybean paste, in the decision to mean it, even when nobody's watching. And the truth is that kind of care doesn't disappear into the person you give it to. It changes the room. It changes what's possible in the room. The day Jenna tied on her apron and sat in front of that camera, she wasn't brave in the way people mean when they say the word like it's easy. Her voice shook. Her hands shook. She had already tried the right channels, and the right channels had swallowed her complaint whole and handed her a termination text. She had every reason to stay quiet. She made a 4-minute video instead and posted it without fixing the parts where she cried. Cinderella waited by the fireplace. Jenna Washington filmed herself in her own kitchen, in her own apron, and told the truth in her own voice. The distance between waiting to be saved and deciding to save yourself is not as far as it seems from the inside. The first step is the whole thing. And Min-jun, peeling garlic with absolutely no idea what he was doing, hold on to that image. He stood next to her and tried. Badly. Without grace. Without the easy competence that powerful people usually insist on performing. He just picked up the garlic and made a mess of it and stayed. Love, when it's real, tends to look like that. Not the speech. Not the grand move. The towel. The garlic. The showing up. Sometimes the smallest, clumsiest gesture is the one that holds the most weight, because it's the one that costs something: the pride, the armor, the careful image of a man who doesn't need anyone. He needed her. He just said it with his hands. This story is a work of fiction,